Brother Lynn Parker will be speaking to us this morning. Very interesting topic. Hate crime laws, and especially how they deal with us in society. Brother Parker is married to his wife, Mary Ann. They have also 5 children. He presently preaches for the New Braunfels congregation, Church of Christ there. Full-time college instructor in San Antonio, Texas as well. He has a Bachelor of Arts in Bible from Southern Christian University, a master's degree from Fort Hays State University. When it comes to the mentioning his past local work, it's blank. And so I presume that he has done past local work. Texas for sure, mission work in Virginia. I always look forward to hearing Brother Parker preach, because I know it's going to be the truth. And the way he presents it always will keep your attention. The most important thing that I know about Brother Parker, and this should be said for every individual who preaches God's Word, is that he is a faithful gospel preacher.
Well, it's always my privilege to be here. And it seems like every year that I'm here, I'll hear some comment about how different I look. It still stands out in my mind, Karen. The first year that we were here, it seemed like we went out to see the aircraft carrier that came in. I stood out there in the sun, and what hair I have turns white. Ever since I was a little boy, it just bleaches in the sun. The next day, Karen didn't know that I knew about it until Michael told me. He said, my wife asked me, he said, does he dye his hair? No, didn't dye my hair. Sister Joyce picked me up yesterday, and she said, at first I didn't recognize you. And we were walking down toward her. I recognized her, and walking toward her, she said, I think your hair's gotten whiter. Or grayer. Maybe she said grayer. But anyway, whiter or grayer, I think the point was still the same, wasn't it? So glad to be here with you, good brethren. Good to see folks that I've not seen in several years. And those from California that I met when you were a little bit younger and hadn't gotten an opportunity to see in some time. And so it's our privilege. I'm thankful for faithful gospel preachers, faithful brethren, faithful elders, brothers and sisters, who by continued faithfulness are an encouragement not only to me, I'm sure to all that are here. I'm so thankful that God in His providence has spared us, that we've been able to be sustained yet another year. And still every single year we note this, that there are some, maybe in the home congregations, maybe among the group that is usually assembled at events like these, that are not here with us any longer. And that's just the passing of time. We're thinking also about how God has allowed us to go through trials and tribulations, difficult situations. Terry Hightower and no, I didn't mean Terry was one of the difficult situations or trials or tribulations, although he could be from time to time. But we're so thankful that he's here with us as well, and we'll have more to say about that, Lord willing, later. Now, we're going to talk about hate crimes and look at some of those today. In the legal field, whenever you're talking about crimes and you're talking about criminal enforcement, then you're dealing with law enforcement processes. Now, when you talk about hate crimes, there are 2 different aspects to hate crimes, and please understand these sometimes overlap, but oftentimes they are distinct, and it's easy to see the distinction. But most of the time now, what we're going to see is then a civil process that may have some criminal implications. And so when we talk about hate crimes, we're talking about then generally the idea that the government is going to say, you cannot take a particular action. And generally when you're talking about crimes, of course you're talking about the criminal aspect of it, you can't take a particular criminal act. You cannot you cannot assault someone, for example, because of their particular protected status without extra punishment. And ordinarily we call that a punishment enhancement. That's the way it would be styled in Texas. I'd imagine it's about the same in Florida. The penal statutes in both states really are remarkably similar. But as you look at it, what you're going to see is that it seems like this is more than just the nose of the camel getting under the tent now. Now it looks like the camel has gotten his entire head under the tent, and there are substantial changes that are on the horizon. We don't know what's going to happen in the future. I can't tell you what's going to happen 5 minutes from now. But if the Lord allows this old world to keep on turning and this earth to stand, then what we may see if this current trend continues is the same thing that's happening in other countries, and that is that you can be criminalized for holding peculiar Christian beliefs and standards and convictions. And that's what we're starting to see. The seeds of that have already been planted in this nation. And it's not something that you're going to be able to point to a particular date and say, on this date, Christianity became a persecuted religion in America. That's not going to happen. What you're seeing is that it's gradual. Is there persecution against Christian conviction today? Yes, there is. Is there persecution? Is there opposition to Christian conviction in this country? Of course there is. It's already here. And we'll look at some specific examples. But it'd be easy to me, and the reason being because it'd be easy for me to talk about generally, in generalities, things are bad in America. Well, we know that. Things can be bad in America. Well, the moral climate is bad. Okay, the moral climate is bad. But specifically, we need to look at some of these things. Here's some that are not in the book, not in this manuscript. At least one I want to go over here in some detail. In Washington, D.C., in 2009, they passed a gay marriage bill. And it said, you know what, we're going to protect, though, religious groups that hold to particularly unique doctrines, and we're not going to interfere with their positions. Now, that sounds noble on the surface. First of all, when you see that some people are passing hate crime bills and then are adding in little caveats or exemptions or exceptions and saying, by the way, this does not mean that you can't practice your religion. And I'll show you another one of those here in just a moment. We have to ask the question, well, why are you condoning the sinful behavior in the first place? And if that wasn't the case in America, if America wasn't allowing, for example, and condoning homosexuality, then there wouldn't be any need for the hate crimes protection against homosexuals in so many states, and now by the federal government as well. But anyway, in Washington, D.C. in 2009, there you have the city council, and with the exception of one councilwoman, Yvette Alexander, she wanted to widen the exemption of their anti-homosexual discrimination law that they were considering to cover not only religious institutions, but also people who refuse to perform an act that otherwise would be called discrimination on the basis of their own individual religious and their moral convictions. In other words, if you, as a church, owned a pavilion and you said certain people in the community can use this, and then a homosexual group said we want to use it for our agenda, that this protection that is written into their anti-discrimination law that they're proposing would say, well, you as a church can do that. And we're going to say, okay, you can say then it's against our religious beliefs and we can't do anything about it. However, if you as an individual who rented out pavilions then as a part of your private business or enterprise were to do the very same thing, you would not be protected and you would be subject to penalty under this anti-discrimination law. Now, Yvette Alexander says, we ought to offer the same protection then to the individuals to protect their moral convictions. If they strongly feel this way, then they shouldn't have to support this or uphold this homosexual agenda in any way or participate in any way. She was overruled, and they went on and passed it. But here's some things that they're saying, just to kind of give you an idea where the background and some of the thinking behind hate crime laws is coming from. The limited exemption, said Phil Mendelson, the judiciary chairman, was as far as the council should go. And he said Alexander's amendment, she wanted to give protection to the individual, ran counter to the intent of the legislation, which is to establish under the law equality for same-sex couples. Now, when we deal with hate crimes bills, a lot of this is going to deal with homosexuality, which I know has been otherwise covered here in this lectureship. And I'm not really trying to infringe on that speaker and that particular topic. At the same time, they're so closely intertwined that I've got to be able to mention those and mention homosexuality, because it seems like that's the driving force. Make no mistake about it, the homosexual community, if we can stereotype here, and I believe this is an accurate depiction of where they want to go as a community, they're not content just to say, leave us alone and let us be. They are not content with that. It is, you will accept us, and you will support us, and you will not only tolerate, but you will do everything for us that you do for anybody else. And if you don't, we're going to get you. It's a very militant, it is a very aggressive stance. It is one that is not sitting back passively saying, I'm out of the closet, but I really don't want to go too far away from it. The closet door was slammed by these folks a long time ago, and they say, we're out here, what are you going to do about it? They are looking to pick a fight. All right? Now, with all of that said, then another councilwoman said that shield, of course, would be an invitation to act on the discriminatory impulse. And it goes on to say the notion that a caterer or owner of a private reception hall might choose not to facilitate a gay marriage is not unprecedented. And then it goes back to one particular account that I do have there, at least in part, in the manuscript, and that's the one in Albuquerque, New Mexico. In 2006, you have Elaine's photography. And Elaine's photography then has a situation where she goes and she photographs weddings. And she gets an email one day, said, would you come and photograph our wedding? We're having a same-sex civil commitment ceremony. And she declines. They send a couple of emails back and forth, and they want to clarify, you're declining this? And she does. Now, she declines it because she believes, based on religious convictions, that marriage is between a man and a woman. Fancy that. And so anyway, she believes that, and that's her strong conviction. She says, I don't want to participate. This is my artistic expression in addition to being my business, and I do not want to condone or help or bless or any of those things. And so these two women that are the complainants in this case file a discrimination accusation or complaint with the New Mexico Human Rights Division. And the New Mexico Human Rights Division hears this, and what they're saying is that, first of all, you're a business, and you're a business that's licensed in the state of New Mexico to practice as a business, and you advertise to the general public as part of your business, and if that's the case, then you cannot discriminate based on race, and you can't discriminate based on religion, and you can't discriminate based on sexual orientation. And so they have the hearing, and the hearing is pretty complete as far as the arguments presented. As a matter of fact, I went and I got the findings of fact, and oftentimes in criminal cases, in appeals cases, in civil cases, and this is a civil case at this point, but I'm saying keep that in mind, that this is going to very easily morph into, it's going to overlap and serve as the basis for criminal actions in the future in this country. But here are the findings of fact in this particular case. And if you would, just bear with me a little bit. I don't like to read a whole lot on these things. I don't want to make this excessively boring. There, I'm not Terry. But anyway, Vanessa Willock, a woman of homosexual orientation, made an email inquiry to Elaine Photography about obtaining the photographic services of Elaine Photography to provide her with photographs of her upcoming same-sex commitment ceremony. That was the first finding of fact. Secondly, Elaine Photography was a commercial business which sold its photographic services, providing photographs to document other people's expressions and events such as wedding engagements, various others. The second finding of fact. The fifth finding of fact, the company was registered with the New Mexico Public Regulation Commission, organized to do business in New Mexico pursuant to the New Mexico Limited Liability Act. The sixth finding of fact, under its articles of organization, Elaine Photography set out that the address of its company's principal place of business was Albuquerque, New Mexico. The eighth one, obviously I'm skipping some of these for time's sake. Elaine's photography website advertising was available to anyone who wished access to it. You see where they're going with this, don't you? It's an open to the public type business. The 15th finding of fact, or fact here, Elaine Photography also had an unwritten company policy which was shared between its co-owners. This is a husband and wife team, Jonathan and Elaine Huguenin. And Elaine Photography would not photograph any image or event which was contrary to the religious beliefs of its co-owners. And then fact 16, in or around September 2006, Ms. Willock and her partner, Misty Collinsworth, formerly known as, were planning a same-sex commitment ceremony, and as part of their arrangements, trying to find a photographer. 17th fact, on September 21, 2006, Ms. Willock contacted the website of Elaine Photography to obtain information about its photographic services and pricing, and sent the following inquiry. We are researching potential photographers for our commitment ceremony on September 15, 2007 in Taos, New Mexico. This is a same-gender ceremony. Now, I'm wondering right here, just stop for a second. Why did she feel a need to include that statement? Just think about it for a minute. I want you to know this is a same-sex gender ceremony. Did she feel like there may be some objection? Did she think that maybe somebody might have some moral conviction? Did she think that anybody in America might still say, you know, I don't feel comfortable with this, I have beliefs against it? All right, goes on here, and I quote, if you're open to helping us celebrate our day, we'd like to receive pricing information. Thanks. And so the reply comes back, as a company, we photograph traditional weddings, engagements, seniors, other things. And then they said they weren't sure about this, so they sent back something else to Elaine Photography. Thanks for your response, but I'm a bit confused. However, by the wording of your response, are you saying that your company does not offer your photography services to same-sex couples? Thanks, Vanessa. 20th finding of fact says, hello, Vanessa. Sorry if our last response was a confusing one. Yes, you are correct in saying we do not photograph same-sex weddings. But again, thanks for checking out our website. Have a great day, Elaine. 21st fact. Ms. Willock was shocked, angered, and saddened to receive Ms. Elaine Huguenin's response. Ms. Willock was also fearful because she considered the opposition to same-sex to be so blatant. So now, are we to gather that the homosexual community, whenever we have a lectureship like this, is shocked and angered and saddened and fearful? I hadn't really seen them too fearful. Have you? I mean, they don't look like they are shaking in their shoes anymore. They may be shaking their fists, but not trembling there in their shoes at all. Goes on to say, Ms. Willock thought that Ms. Elaine Huguenin's response was an expression of hatred at what Ms. Willock had hoped to be a happy occasion. Let me say right here, we can hate sin while we absolutely love the souls of those that are involved in sinful behavior. We do. We oppose, we stand firmly against with every ounce of our being every type of sinful behavior. And I've had an opportunity to talk with someone who is homosexual, and I do from time to time talk to these people. And this young lady was talking to me about that, and she asked my input on this. And she said, here's my parents, and here's their beliefs, and here's their religious affiliation, and I just don't understand why they feel that way. Can you tell me, Mr. Parker, why they feel that way? I said, well, you're asking me for my input here. I'm going to tell you my input. This is probably why they feel this way. Here's what the Bible says about them. Now, she didn't get upset, and it was a friendly and cordial conversation. She said, well, why are people that are religious so opposed to homosexuality? And my reply was simple, because it's opposed to the Bible. She said, well, y'all never pick on anybody else. I said, whoa. If you mean by pick on, do you mean oppose? Yes, that's what I mean. I said, we oppose a man and a woman living together outside of marriage. And we would say that's sinful. It's wrong. Well, I never hear any sermons about it. And I said, well, you just need to then. And I gave her a card and said, here's where we meet at. We'd be glad to have you, because we do preach against fornication. We do. And that's not the only sin. Homosexuality is not the only sin in the world. But it is aggressive, it is militant, and the Lord has given His own divine commentary on it in the Bible. And so we know how God feels about it. But anyway, go back to the findings of fact. Number 22, Ms. Elaine Huguenin refused to provide Ms. Willock with photographic services for a same-sex commitment ceremony because the photographing of such a ceremony was contrary to her religious beliefs. Ms. Huguenin held the religious belief that marriage is only between one woman and one man. Go figure. And that thus a wedding is only between one woman and one man. Ms. Huguenin declined to provide photographic services to Ms. Willock for this ceremony because the same-sex ceremony would be between one woman and another woman. And then number 23, Ms. Huguenin believed that as an artist she became a part of the events which she photographed and an owner of the images or messages conveyed in her photographs, and based on her religious and artistic freedom of expression, she declined to photograph events or promote views which were contrary to her belief system. And I'm going to skip along here very quickly. Number 28, after receiving Ms. Huguenin's response to her inquiry and learning of Ms. Huguenin's different response to a similar inquiry, she had her partner go and send her another email as if she was going to have a regular traditional wedding and see if she would come and photograph it. And of course, Elaine's photography, not trying to hide anything, she said, sure, we'll be glad to come photograph it, not knowing that this was the partner to the homosexual woman that they had turned down previously. And so that was used in the hearing against her. And then the 30th statement of fact, December 20th, 2006, Ms. Willock filed a charge of discrimination against Elaine Photography with the Human Rights Division of the New Mexico Department of Labor. And she alleged that the Elaine Photography discriminated against her because of her sexual orientation in refusing to provide services for her. Now, those were the findings of fact from a testimony that was presented. Both sides were represented by attorneys. The attorneys for Elaine's Photography and Elaine Huguenin, doing business as Elaine's Photography, basically argued this, that to force my client to go and photograph this, when she said for everybody, if she comes and photographs your traditional wedding, she retains the rights to those pictures. She owns those pictures. She does give copyright permission to the person buying photographs, and it's my understanding from photographers that's pretty general. That's pretty usual and standard and typical amongst professional photographers. So she said, I don't want those. I don't want to own those. I don't want to participate in that. That's not in keeping with my artistic freedom of expression. And not only that, it's against my moral and religious system of beliefs. You would be causing me to violate my own religious convictions. And then they argued from the Constitution that she has, Elaine Huguenin, along with her husband Jonathan, and Elaine's Photography, has the right to freedom of religion and freedom in religion and freedom to hold certain religious beliefs and convictions. And the New Mexico Human Rights Division listened to all this, and then they came up with certain conclusions of law. And here are just a few of the conclusions. First of all, they cite the section from New Mexico law. It says it's unlawful discriminatory practice for any person in any public accommodation, which they said Elaine's Photography is a public accommodation, to make a distinction directly or indirectly in offering or refusing to offer its services, facilities, accommodations, or goods to any person because of, and it lists several different reasons there, including sexual orientation. And then it goes on to say this includes then a public business. And then it cites from the Federal Civil Rights Act. Now bear with me, stay with me just a few more minutes, brethren. I know this part is technical, but it goes to the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And if you'll recall, President Johnson signed this into law. And it said this, it's 42 of the United States Code, all persons shall be entitled to the full and equal enjoyment of the goods, services, facilities, privileges, advantages, and accommodations of any place of public accommodation as defined in this section, without discrimination or segregation on the ground of race, color, religion, or national origin. Now, let me give you those grounds again: race, color, religion, or national origin. And that's it. Okay, that's the basis of the protected classes. Now, since 1964 and this date, what certain other ones have done is to say this: the homosexual community, or the person because of sexual orientation, whether he be heterosexual, bisexual, or homosexual, deserves to be part of the protected class. And so certain states, certain cities, like Washington, D.C. that we cited earlier, are taking then this class and the idea from the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which, by the way, was helpful and good in so many different areas and so many different ways, but are saying, let's protect these people too. Well, then we have to go back and we have to wonder this. Are we going to put in there a protected class every drug addict? Don't discriminate against somebody because if you're going to offer an accommodation, if you're going to offer employment, a drug addict. And what about if you had an entire cadre of drug addicts that want to move into your apartment complexes? You've got 4 apartments here for rent, and they say, we'd like to come in there and we'd like to live here. What is your employment? Well, I'm a drug dealer. Okay, now I know that's against the law. I know that. But let's say that somebody says this is what we're going to be doing there. Are we going to protect that eventually? Are we going to protect every single thing? How about this? How about if you own a closed down factory and you happen to be Muslim, and somebody comes in and says, I want you to lease that to me or rent that building to me, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to process bacon there. It's going to be a pork slaughterhouse. How about if you're the Muslim photographer? We want you to come over here and we want you to do our ad campaign and help us out for pork, the other white meat. How's that going to fly? Oh, that doesn't sound... Well, why? We couldn't do that because that wouldn't be politically correct. After all, if then you're a Muslim, we can't talk about you. There's going to be some real problems in all this. Okay. And in the course of this, the New Mexico Human Rights Division said that she does not have the right, Elaine Huguenot does not have the right to say that because of religious convictions, she refuses to do the photography. And they ruled that she did not have an adequate defense, that the New Mexico law was clear and it was plain, and that the law enforcing anti-discrimination was a neutral and basically a helpful law, although they didn't use the word helpful. They used the language that says it is good for government and society, and it prohibits discrimination. They allowed the complainants in this case, Vanessa Willick, to claim for compensatory damages, basically a fine. And she did not ask for that, but what she did ask for was all her attorney's fees, and so since she was the prevailing litigant in this particular case, they awarded $6,600 and some odd dollars to Ms. Willick and her partner for attorney's fees. And so Elaine Photography and its owners appealed. They said, well, we'll go to the Circuit of District Courts of New Mexico and we'll appeal this particular case. And they did, and the court upheld the ruling of the New Mexico Human Rights Division. And you're saying, where is this? It's an appeal. Is it going to go to the Supreme Court? Of course, you understand the Supreme Court hears, what, maybe 200 cases a year at the most? That's it. And unless then a case is granted a hearing, which most cases, the great number of cases are never heard, then it's not going to make it to the Supreme Court, and whatever a court last heard it is going to be the one that whose ruling stands. It hasn't made it through the federal courts yet. It's going to the federal courts. That's where this is headed. It's going to get out of New Mexico, out of New Mexico state courts. It's going to be appealed on constitutional grounds, U.S. constitutional grounds. And I believe, and I'm hopeful, maybe you think I'm being too optimistic, but I believe that Elaine Photography, just based on First Amendment rights, is probably going to prevail with the current Supreme Court as it is right now. Well, that's a lot of ifs, isn't it? It's going to be a great day if the wind is blowing from the east and it's below 72 and it's not raining and there's no clouds in the sky and there's no traffic on the road. There's a lot of ifs there. If the current court stays like it is, if it makes it, all sorts of things can happen. Are we really then sure that we don't have religious persecution in this country right now? I've heard a few brethren say that. Sometimes in prayers we're saying, dear God, we're thankful that we live in a country where we can practice religion then without freedom, or with freedom of from any type of persecution or opposition. Brethren, the country is growing increasingly antagonistic toward Christian ethics and morals and religious convictions. And it may be, maybe not in the lifetime of everyone, all of us that are here right now, but it may be in the lifetime of our children or grandchildren, we see some of the most aggressive anti-Christian sentiment translating into anti-discrimination laws. At least that's what I'm going to call it, and hate crime laws. Now, make no mistake about it, we believe in supporting the government and the laws of the government, Romans chapter 13. We do. As Christians, believe that government is placed there and that it is then God approved to have government. That doesn't mean that God approves of every decision of every single government, or even a lot of the decisions that the current government is making. But we want you to understand where this is going and some of the things that are taking place. When you look at this, also you're going to see that there are certain things that we're going to have to be doing. And there are certain things that we're going to have to be preparing for. And there's certain things legally that we need to be preparing. I wish we had good, solid Christian attorneys that would then be researching this. And I'm not talking about those that are religiously minded, just religiously minded in the general area of Christendom. I'm talking about brethren that are good, solid attorneys that are researching this, because I think they're going to seek to protect it with more vigor than others. When you look at this also, please understand that here are some of the hate crime laws in America. You have the one that was passed by the U.S. government in 2009, which added sexual orientation to the classes protected by federal hate crime statutes. If you assault someone or you kill them because they're a member of a protected class, because, like in the Byrd case, a man was a minority, okay, and they're saying this same act is called the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Hate Crimes Protection Act, that's signed into law by President Barack Obama. And it's going to offer, though, an exception and say we're going to protect Christians in this way. And here's the quote from that law. Nothing in this division shall be construed to allow any court in any criminal trial for any offense described under this division or any amendment by this division, in the absence of a stipulation by the parties, to admit evidence of speech, beliefs, association, group membership, or expressive conduct, unless that evidence is relevant and admissible under the federal rules of evidence. Nothing in this division is intended to affect the existing rules of evidence. Now, translated out of legalese and lawyer type talk, that's simply saying this, that under this hate crimes law, we're not at all saying that we're going to go and look at evidence of what you believe, unless it becomes relevant. Do you hear that? Unless it becomes relevant. I can picture a prosecutor saying it's very relevant for me to find out the attendance records of the church where you attend, because online I see that y'all got sermons against homosexuality. And I want to know if we've got this person charged here, was he in attendance on that particular day? Oh, and he heard that sermon? And maybe, at least the way this is written, not come after the preacher, unless the preacher was up here advocating some type of violent act, which no gospel preacher is going to do. You're not going to advocate violence toward homosexuals or to any other person. But what they are going to say is, this is wrong. And so then if a member of the congregation goes out and commits what some style as a hate crimes act, they're going to say, this is very relevant to our case. And being very relevant to our case, we're going to admit evidence about this sermon. Maybe we're going to play this sermon over here. And then several, in defense of this, have said, you know what? Hey, don't worry about that. That could never happen here. Actually, their exception there provides no more than the Bill of Rights does. It doesn't. And if then the idea that we're supposed to calm down and not worry about it is based on trust us. I remember the snake in the Jungle Book. Do you remember the snake in the Jungle Book? Some of you are nodding there. All right. And he was so beguiling, and he is trying to capture the little jungle boy out here who is without parents. And he comes wrapping his coils around him and close, and he looks in his eyes and he says, "Trust me." And I kind of feel like that's the way the government is. Trust us. Oh, yes, we do trust you. Oh, okay, can you tell the sarcasm there? Okay, and so you look at this and you say, no, we don't trust you. And no, we don't feel comfortable with all this going on. And no, we don't feel like our rights are being protected. Diane Haskett was the mayor of the city of London in Ontario, and she refused to issue a proclamation proclaiming Gay Pride Day. And the Human Rights Commission of Ontario fined her 10,000 Canadian dollars. Also ordered Haskett to make a public statement praising the valuable contributions of gays and lesbians to her community. By the way, Diane Haskett said she wouldn't do it. Yeah, and she said, no, that's not going to happen. Hugh Owens, also in Canada, was ordered to pay $1,500 to 3 homosexual activists who filed a complaint because he published an ad in the newspaper in 1997, and he quoted Bible verses regarding homosexuality. And the advertisement displayed passages to Romans 1, Leviticus 18:22, Leviticus 20:13, 1 Corinthians chapter 6, and verse 9. And so then he was ordered to pay that fine. And then in 2007, a homosexual man won a job discrimination claim against the Church of England. He was turned down for a youth worker's post in Cardiff, Wales, complained to the government he is being unlawfully discriminated against on the basis of his sexual orientation. And the employment tribunal agreed, and homosexual activists rejoiced at the ruling. One said that the church must learn that denying people jobs on the ground of their sexuality is no longer acceptable. I'm sure, brethren, at one time, if they had been thinking ahead to something like this and they just heard that particular quote, that little snippet out of a newspaper, they'd said that can never happen in England. And some brethren had probably said that can never happen in America. And if I told you the story that we just related about Elaine photography, and if we had said that some years ago and not presented it as factual, some people would have said, oh, and there had been some brethren, that's not going to occur. I mean, I've got the right to refuse service to anybody, don't I? I see that the sign there at Dairy Queen, and we reserve the right to refuse service to anyone. No, not according to the laws in certain states and communities anymore. And we summarize this all up then simply by saying we must obey God rather than men. What else would we say about it? This lesson is to make us aware. This lesson is to call us to action. This lesson is to cause us to be looking at these events, be documenting them, be prepared for it, be forewarning the brethren in congregations, be talking to people as much as we possibly can, in hopes that we can stem some of this tide and preserve this country for a little while longer. It's a wicked land in which we live. It's a wicked time in which we live. That quote was from the Sodom Daily Times, quoting Mr. Lot. And it's still a wicked day and time in 2011 here in America. We can get discouraged. We can say, wow, this is just too much, too formidable, too much opposition. What are we going to do? We're so small in number. We're going to do the same thing that outnumbered righteous folks have done for centuries. We're going to love the truth. We're going to preach the truth. We're going to defend the truth. We're going to live the truth. We're going to teach the truth to our children and expect that our homes are going to then be examples of truth. And then at the end of the day, we're going to hear the Lord say, well done, good and faithful servant. And we will have been victorious. Appreciate your attention.